Welcome back, everyone, to another Explainer. Today, we are diving into something absolutely fascinating, the human mind, and specifically what highly intelligent behavior actually looks like out in the real world. We have this culturally ingrained idea that intelligence is perfectly polished. We always picture someone who's super quick with a witty comeback, never misses a beat in conversation, and just has a flawlessly organized life. But psychology? Well, it tells us a completely different story. It turns out highly intelligent behaviors often don't look polished or socially normal at all. In fact, to the outside world, they can seem, well, kind of weird. So let's be real for a second and think about your own habits. Have your quirks ever been judged as awkward by your friends, your family, or maybe your coworkers? Do you ever catch yourself doing things that literally make people raise an eyebrow or ask, "Hey, are you feeling okay?" Okay, let's dive into this, because what people are interpreting as weird might actually be a sign of something completely different happening under the hood. It's like a giant disconnect between society and psychology. When people don't conform to standard social scripts, society is super quick to label them as rude, confusing, or just downright strange. But psychology shows us that intelligent minds aren't trying to be difficult at all. They're just optimizing for entirely different things. They're optimizing for inner depth, incredible efficiency, and intense curiosity, rather than just focusing on outward appearances. They prioritize how they process life over how they look while doing it. Let's break this whole thing down into 5 specific, highly misunderstood behaviors. All right, behavior 1, silence is processing. Picture this scenario. You're right in the middle of a really good, lively conversation. You're talking, and suddenly the person you're speaking with just goes completely quiet. Now, the immediate external judgment is usually pretty negative, right? We assume they're bored or that they've just mentally left the room entirely. It kind of feels like a rejection. But the internal reality is the exact opposite. They haven't checked out, they've actually checked into a much deeper degree. Their brain is suddenly processing multiple thoughts at once. They might be comparing ideas against past experiences or noticing a much deeper layer beneath the surface of the conversation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the psychology behind that sudden silence. It comes down to 2 concepts: internal cognitive load and reflective thinking. This is literally the mental effort required to juggle multiple thoughts, rigorously check ideas, and analyze the underlying meanings of what's being discussed, all in real time. So when someone pauses and stares off into space, they are pausing because they're deeply thinking, not because they've abandoned the chat. It is a clear sign of a highly active mind working in overdrive. Moving right along to behavior 2, priority over perfect memory. We all know someone exactly like this, and hey, maybe it's you. We see the classic signs of everyday forgetfulness. Forgetting a friend's birthday, completely blanking on a brand new colleague's name, or constantly losing your keys. Society often equates this with, well, not being very sharp. But hold on. This exact same person can flawlessly remember complex systems, recognize intricate patterns, and recall highly specific, dense data from some book they read 3 years ago. Psychology tells us that memory follows priority, not difficulty. So what's going on here? Well, it's known as selective memory. It's a psychological tendency where the mind naturally allocates its storage capacity to deep meaning and complex patterns. It's basically filtering out the minor, everyday details to save space and energy. Kind of like a VIP list for your brain's storage. So forgetting where you put your coffee mug? That doesn't mean you have a weak memory. It simply reveals that your memory is highly selective, constantly curating information based on what your brain deems fundamentally important. Okay, behavior 3, curiosity looks like defiance. Have you ever been in a meeting or maybe a classroom where everyone has just accepted a conclusion and is totally ready to move on, but one person stops the whole shebang to ask a fundamental question? This is almost always perceived as a negative. It feels like they're being difficult, causing trouble, or just being incredibly socially awkward. But the reality is actually much more productive. They aren't trying to be a roadblock. They're stopping the train because they are genuinely trying to understand and evaluate the ideas being presented. They literally can't just nod along if the logic doesn't fully click for them. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of cognitive independence. It's the psychological tendency to critically evaluate ideas and concepts instead of just simply absorbing them socially through osmosis. When everyone else accepts something just because the group did, a highly intelligent mind resists that social pressure. They evaluate, they verify. Sure, it might feel a little uncomfortable or awkward in a social setting, but it's a direct reflection of an independent intellect refusing to blindly accept the consensus. Next up, behavior 4, the need to reset. People handle our crazy, busy world in very different ways. As you'll see here, for many, socially recharging is their go-to. They crave external stimulation and gain energy by being around others, talking and engaging. But highly mentally active people, they often require mentally recharging. They experience this sudden, overwhelming need to just disappear for a while. After way too much noise, socializing, or sensory stimulation, they require internal solitude to literally reset their attention and reorganize their thoughts. It's an absolute necessity for their cognitive maintenance. I really want to hammer this point home. Disappearing isn't rejection, it is mental maintenance. When that highly intelligent friend or partner suddenly retreats to their room or goes for a long walk entirely alone, they aren't pushing you away. Their mind is just incredibly busy. And like any high-performance system, it occasionally needs to be taken offline to run some updates, clear the cache, and completely organize itself. Finally, Behavior 5, changing minds unexpectedly. Imagine someone who argues passionately for a specific viewpoint on a Tuesday, but by Thursday, they have completely revised their stance. Society is super quick to judge this one. We call it flip-flopping, right? We view them as unstable, inconsistent, or unreliable. However, psychology reveals a totally different mechanism at play. What they are actually doing is updating their beliefs based on new evidence and a closer alignment with reality. They discovered a new fact, and they adjusted accordingly. So, the crucial point is this concept right here: cognitive flexibility. It's the mental ability to adapt to new, changing, or unplanned events, and, most importantly, to revise your beliefs based on new evidence. Far from being a weakness, this is actually one of the primary markers of high intelligence. They aren't unstable, they are highly responsive to reality. If the facts change, their minds change. They are completely unburdened by the ego of needing to be right all the time, especially if being right means ignoring the truth. All right, wrapping things up. Conclusion: truth over appearance. Let's do a quick recap of what we unpacked in this explainer today. We've seen 5 distinct behaviors that definitely seem weird on the surface, but are actually brilliant underneath. Going quiet suddenly? That's just deep processing. Forgetting simple things is simply the result of selective memory prioritizing complexity. Questioning accepted ideas? That is cognitive independence in action. Needing space is essential mental maintenance, and changing your mind unexpectedly is a true sign of high cognitive flexibility. It really all boils down to this fantastic thought from our source material. Intelligence isn't always stylish. Highly intelligent people aren't optimizing to look impressive. Sometimes they look strange. Sometimes they look a bit awkward. But these behaviors reveal a mind that fundamentally values truth, understanding, and efficiency way over merely maintaining social appearances. So let me turn this back over to you with a final question to think about. Which of these weird habits do people notice in you? Are you the one zoning out mid-conversation, totally losing your keys, or changing your mind the second the facts change? The next time someone gives you a funny look, just remember, you might not be weird. You might just be incredibly misunderstood. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking those great questions.